night. Thank you for stopping by another video on ADHD by Wilhelm. How's it going, folks? So for today we're going to talk about food, diet. What does it do for ADHD? How does it affect ADHD? Does it help? Does it not help? All the above. Research is showing tremendously that what we eat really affects how our body acts, what it does, what it doesn't do, what it should do, that it doesn't do, etc., etc. So it is really important. That phrase, you are what you eat, is truly, truly important, and one that we should take seriously. So we're going to do a little deep dive today in terms of food and how it affects our body and how it affects our brain. And most importantly, if we're not eating too good, how much of a negative impact that's going to have on our ADHD. You'd be surprised. So stick around. I'm going to try to make this short and concise. And let's do some learning, shall we? Let's get going. Now, first term of definition here, we got the gut microbiome. Now, the term gut microbiome refers specifically to the microorganisms living in your intestines. A person has about 300 to 500 different species of bacteria in their digestive tract. While some microorganisms are harmful to our health, many are incredibly beneficial and even necessary to a healthy body. Now, numerous studies in the past 2 decades have demonstrated links between gut health and the immune system, mood, mental health, autoimmune diseases, endocrine disorders, skin conditions, and cancer. Now, the gut microbiome, your gut microbiome, is made up of trillions of microorganisms and their genetic material that live in your intestinal tract. These microorganisms, mainly comprising bacteria, are involved in functions critical to your health and well-being. Research is starting to show that our gut essentially is almost like a second brain. Really important tool for the body. So, I'm sure a lot of you, or some of you at least, who have watched my video, I forget which video it is exactly, but on one of my videos I talk about the infamous belt issue, where if the belt is too tight or just doesn't feel right, you're going to get nauseous and there's going to be difficulty breathing. So, the gut is rather important. And it's interesting because back when I stated that in the video, I didn't see the importance of the gut microbiome. This is a couple of years ago that I made this video. So, but now I want to go into it a bit further, especially after finding out that your gut is essentially a second brain. Are you kidding me? You need to get that bad boy on check, especially if we want to get our ADHD on check. Let's search further. Now, Wilhelm, you're probably asking yourself, what can we do to improve our gut health? Well, here's 7 ways to improve your gut health. Number 1, take probiotics and eat fermented foods. A quick Google search into what has probiotics. You can take probiotics by themselves. There's certain foods that have probiotics. I consume a lot of Greek yogurt that has probiotics. And fermented foods, kimchi for example, there's a lot of them out there. You can search it up. Number 2, eat prebiotic fiber. Number 3, eat less sugar and sweeteners. Not that hard to do for some of us. Number 4, reduce stress. Now, when you have ADHD, this is not going to be all that easy to do, but it takes a couple of steps and it is possible. Number 5, avoid taking antibiotics unnecessarily. Number 6, exercise regularly. This can be at least 30 minutes of a nice walk, maybe a little bit of a jog. Research has shown that with just 30 minutes of some light cardio, you can really get yourself out of a funk and raise up your mood and feel a whole lot better. And number 7, get enough sleep. Easier said than done for some of us with ADHD, especially the inattentive ADHD types like myself, who without the help of supplements would take about 4 to 5 hours to fully go to sleep when I was a kid. So, yeah, I have a video on ADHD and sleep if you want to check it out. It gives you some tips and pointers on how you can get to sleep. And a couple of my supplement videos mention what supplements you can take in order to help your deep sleep be deeper and for your brain to get more melatonin going throughout the night. So anyway, continuing on, those are 7 ways that you can improve your gut health, because your gut is really, really important, as research has demonstrated. So now let's find out, what are some of the consequences of having bad gut health? Let's take a look. When you got too much bad bacteria, this causes children to not be able to produce certain neurotransmitters, i.e. dopamine and serotonin. Now, those are 2 giants in the ADHD population, because most of us have issues with those 2 neurotransmitters, dopamine and serotonin, i.e. the brain's reward system. Now, moving along, there's also going to be difficulty not breaking down food completely due to inflammation. Inflammation is no joke, folks. We're going to get a little deeper into that in a bit. And as well, we see the potential risk of a leaky gut. What is leaky gut? Leaky gut, also known as increased intestinal permeability, is a digestive condition in which bacteria and toxins are able to leak through the intestinal wall. Now, if you look at a picture like the one we have up here, imagine bad toxins getting out of your gut, going in different places in the body that they ain't supposed to be. This is going to cause a wide variety of problems, like the following. Let's take a look. Leaky gut symptoms include the following. The ones in red are very common amongst the ADHD population. Let's start out. First on the list, we got chronic diarrhea, constipation, or bloating. The next one, we have nutritional deficiencies, fatigue. A lot of people with inattentive ADHD are constantly fatigued. Headaches, that's something I've noticed in a lot of people with ADHD I've worked with, a common complaint of headaches, perhaps due to issues in the prefrontal cortex. And then we have confusion, difficulty concentrating, a hallmark of ADHD. We see skin problems such as acne, rashes. Then we see joint pain. Now, joint pain is more common than you would think in the ADHD community. From a lot of people I worked with, from a lot of research I've done, this is due to a lack of collagen and due to a lack of B12 and various other reasons. And then we see widespread inflammation. Now, this is tough, because when there's a lot of inflammation going down the body and the brain, the body's not going to be able to take in enough nutrients or enough of the nutrient for it to work properly. And this is going to give us a lot of issues down the line, such as the next one. Not being able to absorb nutrients like magnesium. Too much copper, not enough zinc, not enough iron, which can lead to being anemic. Yeah, and this causes a lack of focus. So, some people might have leaky gut and not even be aware of it. But these symptoms are quite alarming, because when you have ADHD, some of us might already have these symptoms, and then consuming this food, or the types of food that are going to mess up our gut and cause leaky gut symptoms, yeah, it's going to make our ADHD a lot worse. And after studying and researching more about food and diet and the gut microbiome, I have come to a new consensus about ADHD and the individual. So I'm going to discuss this a little bit later on in the video, because I think it's quite important. So let's move along. Now, high energy requirement tissues such as the brain are highly dependent on mitochondria. Mitochondria are intracellular organelles deriving and storing energy through the respiratory chain by oxidative phosphorylation. In a single neuron, hundreds of thousands of mitochondria are contained. I can see some of you rolling your eyes as to, I haven't studied this since the high school days. Well, it's time to do a little refreshing. Because mitochondria is really important, especially in the body and in the brain. Now, let's see what happens when a mitochondria isn't functioning too well. When mitochondria are not functioning well, a wide variety of symptoms can emerge, including the following. I've underlined the terms here that have to do with ADHD and that I've seen in my ADHD research and the people I've worked with. First on the list, we have developmental delay or regression. Now, research has shown that those of us with ADHD are about 3 to 5 years behind our contemporaries, i.e. the neurotypicals, people without ADHD. In school. Next point, language impairment. There is certainly an issue with some of us with ADHD when it comes to speaking. Now, social impairment, a common ADHD trait. And we have intellectual disability, which some of us with ADHD unfortunately have. Then we have neuropsychiatric symptoms, which include the also infamous ADHD, anxiety, which a lot of people with ADHD suffer from, OCD, another comorbid issue that comes for some people with ADHD, and depression, which is a hallmark for quite a bit of people with ADHD, especially in the inattentive ADHD field. Because research has shown that those who have inattentive ADHD have the highest rate of suicide. Unfortunately. That's not to say that the other two subtypes, the hyperactives and combined types, don't suffer from depression. Having ADHD is really tough. It can certainly cause depression for any subtype of ADHD. Moving along, we see seizures, headaches, and hearing impairment. Since our brain is highly dependent on mitochondria for the juice, so to speak, for energy and for its functions, we need to help our brain out, especially if we have ADHD, because we could be making our ADHD a whole lot worse. So how do we assist in helping out mitochondria? Let's take a gander, shall we? How to improve/increase mitochondria? Number 1, eating nutrient-dense whole foods. Now, this should include avoiding refined sugars, processed flours, industrial oils, and trans fat. Why? Because they can damage your mitochondria and prevent them from properly producing energy. It is recommended to avoid gluten, soy, and dairy in order to obtain optimal mitochondrial health. Easier said than done, but it is possible. Step 2, exercise. Exercise is highly important. You got to keep in mind, folks, our ancestors were not just sitting on down in a computer all day in a room. They were out and about, so we still need to do that as well. It doesn't have to be for hours. A simple 30 to 45 minutes, a couple of days a week of cardio and other types of exercise will do your brain and body wonders and will help out your ADHD. So, step 3, we have caloric restriction and intermittent fasting. I practice intermittent fasting myself due to the keto diet. Then we see step 4, taking NADH. Now, NADH is a supplement that I tried out when I was looking for a supplement to help me out with norepinephrine and with dopamine, the catecholamine neurotransmitters, if you will. So, it's a good supplement. I just found N-acetyltyrosine a bit more helpful. So, but some people seem to find help with taking NADH, so it's recommended. And step 5, ketogenic dieting. I practice the keto diet, like I mentioned, and it is not that difficult of a diet to do. In the first stages, it's a little troubling, but once you get into it, you're going to feel so good that things are going to come a lot more smoothly, if you will. So, moving on. We see number 6, B vitamins. Now here's where some of the supplements and vitamins start coming in. B vitamins are absolutely important for various reasons, and we don't get enough of that. So, out of all the B vitamins, I would recommend, if you have ADHD, I would recommend a vitamin B12, a methyl form of B12. We will get into methylation right after this portion. Number 7, we see our good friend CoQ10, coenzyme 10, ubiquinol. Very helpful supplement for keeping your heart on check and safe, and various other advantages. Our body makes coenzyme 10, but the older we get, the less of it we make. And if you're taking stimulant medication and want to keep your heart and blood pressure safe and stop it from rising, what's recommended is coenzyme 10. Remember to speak to your healthcare professional before trying out supplements, just to be on the safe side. Number 8, magnesium. Magnesium really helpful for digestion. The most recommended form of magnesium, the most bioactive form of magnesium, that is recommended is chelated buffered magnesium. So, magnesium is great. It helps the body digest food and digest the medication and various other helpful components. Then we see number 9. We have carnitine and the infamous alpha lipoic acid. Now, I tried carnitine for a while. I didn't see the benefits in myself, but I have worked with a few people who say that carnitine is quite helpful for them. And our alpha lipoic acid is really helpful for acetylcholine levels, which research has shown people with ADHD have low levels of. So then we see creatine is also recommended. Creatine is a great supplement to take when you work out, rather before you work out. And the most bioactive type of creatine is creatine monohydrate. And then we see number 11, N-acetylcysteine. And then we see number 12, ginkgo biloba. So it's interesting to know how many supplements are recommended in terms of helping out your mitochondria. So for those of us who already take supplements and take quite a bit of these supplements, our mitochondria is already getting helped out. So self-high five to you and to me. So for those of us who don't take supplements and don't know really where to start, I have a couple of videos on supplements that you might want to check out. I have a supplement regimen and a routine that I take daily that helps me out with my ADHD. And some of you are probably wondering, well, what if it's a lot and I don't know what to start out with? Well, there's some supplements that are recommended to start off with that are more so the all-in-one types. A supplement by the name of grapeseed extract. That grapeseed extract is a oligomeric polyphenol. It is a helpful agent against fighting oxidation. It is one of the strongest antioxidants out there. And interestingly enough, it helps boost multiple neurotransmitters that people with ADHD have trouble with. It helps boost up dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and a little bit of adrenaline as well. So in that instance, the only thing that's missing is acetylcholine out of the core neurotransmitters of difficulty with ADHD. So grapeseed extract is a good OPC to start out with. And there's a whole book about it as well that you might want to research out there if you want to try out OPCs for ADHD. Because it's interesting. Who would have thought that antioxidants would have been quite helpful for ADHD? So that might be something to try out. Maybe not. Maybe so. So, going back to what we were talking about, supplemental usage for mitochondria health and for ADHD health is crucial and very important if we want to get our brain having the proper amount of energy and being able to take in the nutrients that it needs. There are some other things to watch out for. We need to watch out for heavy metal toxins. And I'm not talking about the music of heavy metal. I'm talking about heavy metal toxins like mercury, arsenic, etc., etc. So we need to watch out for that because quite a bit of food carries these heavy metal toxins that can very much negatively impact the ADHD that we got. So what foods got them? What can we do? What are some of the details? Let's take a look. Common heavy metal toxins are lead, mercury, and arsenic. Heavy metal toxins found in the environment/food block energy producing pathways in cells, limit metabolism, neurotransmitters in the brain. Let me say that again. They limit metabolism, neurotransmitters in the brain. It affects your body's ability to make energy under mitochondria. So that's rather unfortunate. We see something else here that is affecting mitochondria, which we have learned is so important and vital to the body and to the brain especially. So what are some foods we can avoid or limit in our diet to avoid some of these heavy metal toxins? Some research has shown that rice, particularly brown rice, should be avoided or limited because it contains arsenic. Some fish, such as large and long-living fish, as they tend to contain more mercury. This is why I take flaxseed oil instead of fish oil. And alcohol and non-organic foods. Now this is important because this is another component that is going to mess up the mitochondria. So we mess up the mitochondria, we're going to have a bunch of issues where the brain isn't going to have enough energy, isn't going to be able to take in the nutrients that it needs. Then comes issues of inflammation where the nutrients aren't going to be taken in. You throw in leaky gut in there as well, and you got a whole mess of problems where you got the ADHD symptoms just getting a whole lot worse. You see why I'm saying that food is so important? What we eat can really make our condition a whole lot worse. So what we consume is truly important. Let's continue on. The next point I wanted to talk about is methylation. Now, what is methylation? Methylation is a process that the body uses in thousands of interactions to activate molecules to do their job. This happens millions of times a second. Protects and repairs your DNA, part of the detox pathways, and is really important in neurotransmitter metabolism. Two major genes that control methylation are the MTHFR gene and the CMT gene. Now, it's interesting to note that a third of our DNA codes for enzymes. I want to emphasize on the CMT gene here. Now, the CMT gene metabolizes catecholamine neurotransmitters dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. Now, the prefrontal cortex of the frontal lobe. That is very important. Dopamine and norepinephrine, by the way, are the two main neurotransmitters that stimulant medication helps out with, for those of you who didn't know. And the main issues with ADHD are said to occur in the prefrontal cortex of the frontal lobes. So it's interesting that the affection, it's interesting that the CMT gene being affected gives issues in all this stuff. Continuing on, deal with behavior, executive function, self-regulation, concentrating, and learning. Those are all hallmark ADHD issues. So when there's an issue with the CMT gene and the way it metabolizes, what's going down is that if there's issues of methylation due to inflammation and the other things that we have mentioned, the CMT gene is not going to be able to metabolize the dopamine and norepinephrine. Therefore, we're going to have trouble in the prefrontal cortex and the frontal lobes. And as we've read, this deals with behavior, executive functioning, self-regulation, concentrating, and learning. Those are all hallmark ADHD problems that so many people I have worked with have issues with and complain about. This is the type of stuff that gets us fired frequently from jobs. The type of stuff that makes it hard to fall asleep, makes it hard to concentrate, makes it hard to have our executive functioning skills on check. It is truly, truly important. So we got to take this seriously, especially if we have little ones and kids who depend on us as parents. We don't want to make their ADHD any worse. It's rather unfortunate. I know a lot of us parents who have ADHD might not have the energy sometimes to go and cook some food at the house, but thankfully these days eating healthy is in style. There's a lot more healthy options at an affordable price in supermarkets and in fast food places. There's a lot of fast food places that are more of the higher end and have more organic based foods. So we have more options than we did 15, 20 years ago, thankfully. So take that into consideration. So after mentioning all that, what should we avoid food-wise? Wilhelm, you're telling us all these things. Half of them we probably don't really grasp, but that's totally okay. A lot of this is biology and physiology. The main important thing is we got to have the drive, the discipline, and the desire to eliminate some of these foods that might be causing us or our kids, family members, and friends some harm. So what foods should we avoid to help our ADHD out? Well, let's find out. Number 1, avoiding high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup and sugar have been shown to drive inflammation. Remember, inflammation causes us a grip load of problems in terms of the body and brain being able to absorb nutrients and have enough energy. Now, the inflammation which is associated with an increased risk of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. All good fun, right? Not. Number 2, food coloring. commonly used for food dyes such as yellow number 5, yellow number 6, and red 40 pose risks including hyperactivity in children. Let me repeat that again. Pose risks including hyperactivity in children. Does that sound like ADHD? Some also pose a risk of cancer, like red number 3 and allergic reactions. Number 3, preservatives. One of the most harmful effects of preservatives on food items is their ability to transform into carcinogen agents. Some of the food items consist of nitrosamines, a preservative which has nitrates and nitrates, which mix with the gastric acids and form cancer-causing agents. We got to be careful about them preservatives now. Then we got number 4, soy. Soy can cause some mild stomach and intestinal side effects such as constipation, bloating, and nausea. It can also cause allergic reactions involving rash, itching, and anaphylaxis in some people. Some people might experience tiredness. Soy might also affect thyroid function. Now that is a subject I've seen some people with ADHD mentioned, issues with the thyroid. So soy ain't going to be doing you any favors if you had thyroid issues. Number 5, gluten. It's common in foods such as bread, pasta, pizza, and cereal. Gluten provides no essential nutrients. People with celiac disease have an immune reaction that is triggered by eating gluten. They develop inflammation and damage in their intestinal tracts and other parts of the body when they eat foods containing gluten. I, for one, have tried to eliminate gluten from my diet, and I can't really eat it anyway, just because I'm on the keto diet, and breads and whatnot are a no-no. So, but you'd be surprised. People with ADHD, some people who remove gluten from their diet, they show positive results, and some of the hyperactivity goes down a bit. So, something to look into, perhaps. And number 6, avoiding artificial flavors. What are the consequences of artificial flavors? Allergic reactions and food hypersensitivity, worsening of asthmatic symptoms, abdominal pain, diarrhea, and vomiting. So there are a lot of markets and even food places, fast food places, where we can go and acquire more healthy based food. It's so cool that we're living in a time where healthier food is more readily available and at a affordable price for a good amount of us. So even markets here in the US like Ralph's have really upped their organic game. So there's a lot of options we got out there. We just got to look out for these ingredients. So take a screenshot of the things that I mentioned in there if you'd like, and try to avoid them, because they really cause a lot of harm and can make the ADHD a whole lot worse. So now you're probably asking yourself, well, what are some things that are recommended to eat that can make our ADHD symptoms perhaps go down, improve, etc., etc.? What should we eat? What should we aim to eat? Well, here are a couple of choices and a couple of options. Let's take a look. Foods they're recommended to eat. One should aim to eat organic food, number 1. Number 2, grass-fed beef. That's where the cows go and eat basically grass. They're not feeding on feed that is with a bunch of contaminants and other bull crap that is put in there to basically speed up the process and a bunch of other horrible things. So grass-fed beef, highly recommended. Number 3, free-range chicken, where the chickens have a chance to go out and about. They're not stuck in cages. Healthier chicken, healthier food. Then we have eggs. Free-range eggs are also recommended, especially the ones with high omega oils. Are going to be helpful for the ADHD. And then what's also recommended is wild-caught fish. Also going to be helpful for the omega oils. And then we have berries. And some berries have quite a bit of sugar, so just be on the lookout. And then we have number 6, deep leafy greens, spinach, kale, certain types of lettuce, etc., etc. Simple Google search will help you out. And then what's also recommended is different sorts of nuts, cashews, walnuts, stuff of that nature, packed with a lot of nutrients that'll really be able to help you out. So as we have seen, food is highly important when it comes to our ADHD. It can really make our ADHD a whole lot worse by giving us so many of these negative symptoms and problems that are mentioned in here. Now, studying this to end off for today has really showed me that ADHD comes in all sorts of varieties, because what ends up happening is that research has shown that if one parent has ADHD, there's a 75% chance that the child will end up having ADHD as well. So there's other types of people that are not born with ADHD, but rather have ADHD symptoms due to the bad diet of what they're eating. As we have seen today in this video, there are certain foods and certain diets that if we keep consuming this negative food, it's going to cause people who don't have ADHD to have ADHD-like symptoms, and that's very unfortunate. A simple elimination diet, finding out what foods are causing the most harm, taking those foods out, and then perhaps getting a healthier diet can cause wonders, and have caused wonders in a positive way for a lot of people, where the ADHD symptoms diminish and sometimes outright just go away completely. Because I believe that that person never truly had ADHD, but rather had ADHD symptoms as a consequence of having a bad diet where their gut and their mitochondria were just really messed up and off balanced. So it's really interesting, because that's not something I took into mind when I was studying earlier on. I knew the diet was important, but I didn't know how significant it was. It's interesting, because some people who otherwise would not have ADHD have ADHD symptoms due to the diet they are consuming. And unfortunately, there's another type of ADHD person where they might not be born with ADHD, but when they're younger, if they consistently have a bad diet that includes a lot of the stuff we spoke about earlier, where your mitochondria, your gut health, and your inflammation are just off the wall and screwed over, what ends up happening is receptor sites for your different neurotransmitters that would otherwise be forming are being hampered when you're a kid. So those neural pathways and those receptor sites for dopamine, serotonin, and other neurotransmitters that are essential for those of us with ADHD, those receptor sites for those neurotransmitters are never formed, and are formed in a less amount. So we have less dopamine, less norepinephrine, less serotonin, less acetylcholine. And then that's when the gene mutation starts in other parts of the body, because the body can't take in those nutrients. The brain doesn't have enough energy to utilize those nutrients either. So what ends up happening is the kid born without ADHD, unfortunately, ends up having ADHD as a consequence of a bad diet, because in their formative years, they weren't eating all that well. And in those formative years, if they're not eating that good, the formation of neural pathways that are essential for you to have enough of these neurotransmitters I mentioned, we're not going to have enough of those, unfortunately. And thereby making a child who otherwise wouldn't have ADHD to have ADHD. And I think that's really unfortunate. When we have the knowledge of what happens, especially as a consequence like eating bad food consistently, and giving that to our younger ones, we're doing them a very big disservice. We're doing ourselves a very big disservice by continuing to eat really unhealthy food and continuing to have an unhealthy diet. I'm a big supporter of eating healthy. It has really helped me out, and it's really helped me change my life. And it's also helped out and changed the life of some people I worked with. And I would perhaps like for you to reflect upon some of these things and think about it. And maybe you can also change your diet as well and improve your ADHD symptoms and help your son or daughter perhaps with their ADHD symptoms as well. The body is a temple. We are what we eat. And when we have ADHD, what we eat is all the more important. So take that to heart and take that to note. These are important facets that can really impact our lives for the better or for the worse. The choice is up to you. I truly hope you can reflect upon some of the things we worked on today and that you found some help in this video. This is your ADHD comrade Wilhelm, over and out.